Either kill me, or take me as I am, because I'll be damned if I ever change. My manner of thinking, so you say, cannot be approved. Do you suppose I care? A poor fool indeed is he who adopts a manner of thinking for others. In order to know virtue, we must first acquaint ourselves with vice. It is only by way of pain one arrives at pleasure. Fuck. Is one expected to be a gentleman when one is stiff? We are no guiltier in following the primitive impulses that govern us than is the Nile for her floods, or the sea for her waves. Sexual pleasure is, I agree, a passion to which all others are subordinate, but in which they all unite. If it is the dirty element that gives pleasure to the act of lust, then the dirtier it is, the more pleasurable it is bound to be. To judge from the notions expounded by theologians, one must conclude that God created most men simply with a view to crowding hell. What does one want when one is engaged in the sexual act? That everything around you give you its utter attention, think only of you, care only for you. Every man wants to be a tyrant when he fornicates. Certain souls may seem harsh to others, but it is just a way, beknownst only to them, of caring and feeling more deeply. The man who alters his way of thinking to suit others is a fool. There is no God. Nature sufficeth unto herself. In no wise hath she need of an author. Lust is to the other passions what the nervous fluid is to life. It supports them all, lends strength to them all. Ambition, cruelty, avarice, revenge are all founded on lust. Beauty belongs to the sphere of the simple, the ordinary, whilst ugliness is something extraordinary, and there is no question but that every ardent imagination prefers in lubricity the extraordinary to the commonplace. Social order at the expense of liberty is hardly a bargain. Sex without pain is like food without taste. I want to be the victim of his errors. Your body is the church, where nature asks to be reverenced. All universal moral principles are idle fancies. The only way to a woman's heart is along the path of torment. It is only by enlarging the scope of one's tastes and one's fantasies, by sacrificing everything to pleasure, that the unfortunate individual called man, thrown despite himself into this sad world, can succeed in gathering a few roses among life's thorns. It is not my mode of thought that has caused my misfortunes, but the mode of thought of others. What we are doing here is only the image of what we would like to do. Sex is as important as eating or drinking, and we ought to allow the one appetite to be satisfied with as little restraint or false modesty as the other. My passions, concentrated on a single point, resemble the rays of a sun assembled by a magnifying glass. They immediately set fire to whatever object they find in their way. I don't know what the heart is, not I. I only use the word to denote the mind's frailties. Religions are the cradles of despotism. The reasoning man who scorns the prejudices of simpletons necessarily becomes the enemy of simpletons. He must expect as much and laugh at the inevitable. Destruction, hence, like creation, is one of nature's mandates. True happiness lies in the senses, and virtue gratifies none of them. One must do violence to the object of one's desire. When it surrenders, the pleasure is greater. Happiness is an abstraction. It is a product of the imagination. It is a way of being moved, which depends entirely on our way of seeing and feeling. Can we become other than what we are? Let us give ourselves indiscriminately to everything our passions suggest, and we will always be happy. Conscience is not the voice of nature, but only the voice of prejudice. Love is stronger than pride. Anything beyond the limits and grasp of the human mind is either illusion or futility. And because you're God, having to be one or the other of the two, in the first instance, I should be mad to believe in him, and in the second a fool. Nature has endowed each of us with a capacity for kindly feelings. Let us not squander them on others. In order to know virtue, we must acquaint ourselves with vice. Only then can we know the true measure of a man. Nothing quite encourages as does one's first unpunished crime. The past encourages me, the present electrifies me, and I have little fear for the future. And my hope is that the rest of my life shall by far surpass the extravagances of my youth. Variety, multiplicity, are the two most powerful vehicles of lust. Truth titillates the imagination far less than fiction. One has always had too much when one has had enough. I assumed that everything must yield to me, that the entire universe had to flatter my whims, and that I had the right to satisfy them at will. Sex should be a perfect balance of pain and pleasure. Without that symmetry, sex becomes a routine rather than an indulgence. Conversation, like certain portions of the anatomy, always runs more smoothly when lubricated. The idea of God is the sole wrong for which I cannot forgive mankind. Lust's passion will be served. It demands, it militates, it tyrannizes. Crime is the soul of lust. What would pleasure be if it were not accompanied by crime? It is not the object of debauchery that excites us, rather the idea of evil. In an age that is utterly corrupt, the best policy is to do as others do. One is never so dangerous when one has no shame than when one has grown too old to blush. There is a kind of pleasure which comes from sacrilege, or the profanation of the objects offered us for worship. The most fortunate of persons is he who has the most means to satisfy his vagaries. The horror of wedlock. The most appalling, the most loathsome of all the bonds humankind has devised for its own discomfort and degradation. When a woman wants sex, she always talks about her former lovers. No lover, if he be of good faith and sincere, will deny he would prefer to see his mistress dead than unfaithful. Why do you complain of your fate when you could so easily change it? How delicious to corrupt, to stifle all semblances of virtue and religion in that young heart. Happiness lies only in that which excites, and the only thing that excites is crime.